Hey everyone! Today's video is a little different than usual, but something I've been working on for a while here lately. Introducing Wings of Fire as D&D characters, complete with backstory. I think I started the project sometime in mid-June, and I finished it about a week ago now, so yeah, it was a lengthy process. However, I really enjoyed it, especially the planning and sketching phases, where I got to put everyone's jazzy new looks together. I ended up doing 13 of the main characters, since apparently I have no comprehension of project moderation, and I divided them up into 6 teams. We'll go in order of who I like best, saving my favorites for last. Starting us off, we have the Ocean Explosion crew. We'll begin with Peril, a sorcerer. For those of you who aren't familiar, sorcerers are spellcasters whose magic stems from their bloodline, or some other inherent quality, whereas other spellcasters have to learn their magic. Peril is a sorcerer whose abilities are entirely fire-based, due to a quirk of her heritage. Not only is she physically hot to the touch, sometimes causing accessories to smolder, but in combat she can release huge arcs of flame at will. Her scales aren't as hot as in the books, she can touch other dragons, and plenty of material objects. However, it takes a lot of self-control not to literally burst into flames when she gets annoyed, surprised, or excited. She grew up in the Kingdom of Sky, in the royal court of Queen Scarlet, working with the Queen's soldiers on missions of her choosing. However, as Peril grew older, she began to grow unhappy with the situation, exploring outside the borders of the kingdom in secret. Sometime later, during an official visit from a delegation from the Kingdom of Sea, she met another young sorcerer by the name of Turtle. Although he was also a prince, he had found his real calling in sorcery, and was traveling with the delegation as protection. They'd come to Queen Scarlet's court in response to allegations of lost Skywing goods on the borders of their kingdoms. However, as negotiations continued, Peril found out that Scarlet was staging these robberies as an excuse to launch an attack on their less militant neighbors. The young Skywing was torn between loyalty to her queen, all she'd ever known, and what she knew to be right. In the end, she revealed what she'd found to Turtle and his other Seawings, helping to avert war. Scarlet was furious, however, and exiled her from the Kingdom of Sky for the rest of her days. Heartbroken, Peril left with Turtle, who offered to help her figure out where to go next. Turtle is also a sorcerer. However, unlike Peril, his magic stems from an incident with a deep-sea deity before he'd even hatched, and his magic is largely water-based. When he realized his gifts, he began finding ways to put them to practical and protective uses, helping his mother's military defend their kingdom. He's well liked by his people. Many dragons see him as the most approachable of the royal family, and Turtle takes pains to keep it that way. His main goal is to improve the lives of those around him. That's why he works with his mother's forces, even though sometimes she annoys him. And it's why he agrees to travel with the delegation sent to the Kingdom of Sky for their protection. After meeting Peril, he decided to move inland for a while. The two of them moved to Possibility, a new town that sprung up between kingdoms. There, the two of them worked together in a multitude of different ways, helping towns' dragons with the problems that spring up, defending travelers from bandits, and taking care of any roving monsters that strayed too near to the town. They're friends with a few other adventurers who pass through on occasion, but for the most part, the two of them enjoy each other's company. Turtle misses the sea, but he has enjoyed getting to experience a new kind of life, and he's come to find he very much enjoys Peril's company. Together, they go by the title Ocean Explosion, a name which Peril suggested and enjoys to no end. Next up, we've got the Wild Lances, a pair of traveling adventurers who roam the marshy swamps and the dense outer edges of the rainforest. Clay is a fighter, which means he's trained to use almost any weapon one can think of, and plenty dangerous without weapons as well. He's pretty tough, heavy built, and able to take and deal serious amounts of damage. He was separated from his family when he was a dragonette, and he's been looking for them ever since. Growing up, he traveled through the vast reaches of the Kingdom of Mud, seeking out new forms of fighting as he searched for his family. However, he hasn't had much luck yet, despite having traveled by now almost the entire southern expanse of the kingdom. Clay doesn't let him get him down though, at least not much of the time. He's a pretty good-natured guy, and he's determined that he'll find them eventually. In the meantime, as he grows older, gaining experience and wisdom, he realizes he can do a lot of good along the way. Now, his search is sometimes interrupted by quests and adventures he undertakes, sometimes to help those in need, sometimes for reward money, and sometimes just for the thrill of adventure. It was on one such adventure that he met another traveler, like himself, and the two of them ended up deciding to travel together. Also, side note, although I decided to go kinda light on his design, I love the wraps above his talons. The blue and white pattern in the fabric looks awesome, and it's a really cool color contrast. Really just does a lot to pull the design together, and it's a pretty simple addition. Glory is a ranger. a warrior skilled in surviving the wilder parts of the world. Although she's originally from the reclusive forest kingdom, whose dragons are rarely seen outside their thick jungle haven, she left when she was a young adult, unhappy with the seclusion of her kingdom. Glory made a new home on the edges of the rainforest, content to enjoy the solitude and the occasional excitement the rough terrain provided her. However, one night, a band of traveling bandits moved through, unaware they were trespassing on taken land. When Glory challenged them, demanding they leave, the bandits attacked ruthlessly, and ended up setting her home on fire before running. Glory gave chase, and met another dragon in the process, one from the Kingdom of Mud. He was in pursuit of the very same group, since they'd laid waste to a peaceful farming village before coming to bother Glory. The two of them decided to team up to chase the bandits down, and they were eventually successful. Both were pleased with the other's skills, and Glory agreed to travel with Clay as he continued looking for his family. The two of them now travel the marshes together, known as the Wild Lances by those who need their help, slowly working their way north on the border between the swamps and the rainforest. Next, we have the Starstringers, whose backstory is probably my second favorite. Moonwatcher is a warlock. Warlocks are also spellcasters, but their magic is neither inborn nor learnt. Their magic comes from a bargain or deal made with another entity or deity. Moonwatcher was born in the Kingdom of Night, the most secretive and hidden kingdom in all of Pyria. Nightwings are almost never seen outside their borders, which are fiercely and jealously guarded. Their kingdom is a huge island off the coast of the main continent. It was volcanic in nature, but the mountain has calmed down in recent centuries, now only a source of warmth and thick black smoke. The rest of the island is perfectly inhabitable though, and the Nightwings haven't suffered living there. The tribe of Night tends to be a highly religious one. They worship a moon goddess and claim that she has blessed them over all dragons, because when favored with the light of her moons, their eggs hatch with dragonets of special powers. No other tribe has such powerful inborn abilities, and certainly not to the extent the Nightwings do. Moonwatcher was one of these dragonets hatched under the gentle light of the moon. Her father gave her to the Temple of Night when she was young to train to be a priestess, so she could hone her visions and her other skills in service of their goddess and their tribe. She grew up in a strict setting, learning to control her emotions as well as discern the emotions of those around her. As she grew older, Moonwatcher also began training with the head oracle, who had decided to take the young Nightwing on as her apprentice and eventual successor. Moonwatcher usually spent her time in training or lessons at the temple, learning deportment and religious history and all about her glorious tribe. However, one day, when she accidentally wandered too far into the tunnels crisscrossing underneath the temple structure, she found something that made her lose faith in her tribe. And it was after this discovery that, in her desperation, she returned to the temple and sought out their goddess, promising that if the moon goddess would grant her the powers to make a difference, Moonwatcher would swear to find and return an article of great value to the goddess. The goddess agreed to the bargain and granted Moonwatcher her powers. The light of the moon is subtle and hard to see. The goddess gave Moonwatcher the ability to turn completely invisible, except in the brightest of sunlight. Additionally, to help her accomplish her goals, she gained a magic sickle blade, the holy weapon of the moon goddess, to wield in battle. The blade turns into a necklace to hide when Moonwatcher isn't using it. I definitely adore Moon's design here. The furs, the silver jewelry, the transparent silks, all of it works together to give her a very mystical, elegant look, which I love. Kinkajou is a bard. Bards are entertainers and spellcasters who use their voice or instrument as the method of casting their magic. Kinkajou is flamboyant and loud, always happy to share her stories and songs with those around her. When she was younger, she was part of a small caravan that traveled through the kingdoms, made up of many different tribes. Her parents were also entertainers, and they passed their craft down to her. The caravan they traveled with seemed to be a simple group of singers, dancers, and actors. However, as Kinkajou would come to learn, they also guarded a talisman of great power that had been taken from the tribe of Night centuries ago for safekeeping. Their group had protected knowledge of its hiding place for hundreds of years. Unfortunately, the Nightwings found out that her family and friends knew the location and staged an attack on the caravan, killing most of their magic users and kidnapping the others to hold prisoner. Kinkajou spent almost a year prisoner of the Nightwings before a sympathetic soul found her. Moonwatcher, an aspiring priestess, met Kinkajou by accident and was horrified by the conditions the little Rainwing was in. She lost faith in her tribe as she began to realize they weren't the holy, blessed dragons they claimed to be. Once she realized that Kinkajou knew the location of an ancient and very valuable magic relic, Moon concocted an insane plan to petition her goddess for powers. The plan worked, and Moonwatcher returned to Kinkajou's cell, using a magic blade to sweep through the bars with one stroke. Freeing Kinkajou and the other prisoners, Moonwatcher led them all in an escape from the island to the mainland of the continent. There, she and Kinkajou decided to set off together to retrieve the talisman and sneak it back to her goddess to fulfill her promise. Along the way, they meet other adventurers, most noticeably an odd Icewing and Sandwing pair, and Kinkajou helps encourage her shy and often socially inept friend into a relationship with the charming Sandwing. The trio of lucky gambles finds their title in the fact that most of their misadventures seem to go right only by sheer luck. This group is made up of Sunny, Tsunami, and Starflight. Starflight is a Nightwing. However, he's one of the very, very few who didn't grow up in the icy seclusion of their island kingdom. His father and mother separated when he was too young to even remember, so he's never actually met his birth mom. When Starflight was 2, his father fell in love with a Sandwing named Thorn, leader of a group of thieves and vigilantes in one of the large Sandwing cities, and Starflight's father ran away to be with the Sandwing. A year later, Starflight had a half-sister named Sunny. His father stayed in the Scorpion Den with Thorn for several years after that. Starflight, always hungry for more knowledge, began studying at the small, seedy school for wizards, nestled in the poor district in the city. There, he learned how to manipulate the things around him with the knowledge and spells he worked so hard to amass. As he grew older, his thirst for knowledge only grew, and eventually the young wizard would begin traveling to other cities to study under their masters as well. Sunny, Starflight's half-sister in this AU, is a cleric. Like wizards, I think most people know what clerics are. They're spellcasters who focus largely on healing spells, at their simplest. They use magic in service of a divine entity or deity. When Sunny was hatched, with her golden scales and shining coloring, her mother knew her dragonette would serve the sun goddess. True to Thorn's prediction, Sunny grew up to become a cleric of the sun deity, learning healing spells and helping her mother's gang when they needed healing. Sunny was an enthusiastic and curious terror of a dragonette, especially once she began learning magic, and Starflight spent a good portion of his childhood chasing his half-sister down and rescuing her from whatever situation she'd gotten herself into. Once he decided to begin traveling to other cities, Sunny decided to go with him, against both her parents' wishes. However, she and Starflight had been inseparable with dragonettes, and she refused to leave him on his own. The Kingdom of Sand was the largest, and the most populated, but many of their cities and villages boasted an eclectic mix of hybrids and dragons from other tribes as well as Sandwings. The kingdom was currently in political shambles, actually split into several territories ruled by several warring factions. Although fighting breaks out on occasion, for the most part the kingdom is relatively peaceful. Sunny and Starflight travel together, Starflight seeking more knowledge, while Sunny seeks more experiences. However, some time after they leave the Scorpion Den, they run into the third and final member of their group. Tsunami is, you guessed it, a barbarian. I couldn't resist. Basically, barbarians are fighters who can rage. That's about it. They're fighters, but angry. Anyways, Tsunami, though a Seawing, has lived in the Kingdom of Sand her entire life. When she was very young, a political rival kidnapped her from her mother, who just happens to be queen of the entire Kingdom of Sea, and left her to die in the desert. However, she was found by traders and brought to one of the Sandwing cities. Of course, Tsunami doesn't know this. All she remembers is growing up on the streets of a landlocked city, learning how to fight and fend for herself. By the time she meets Sunny and Starflight, she's a famous street brawler, making a living by betting on herself and winning. Most of the time, anyways. She meets Sunny and Starflight, though, and the three hit it off. The two spellcasters offer to pay her to travel with them as protection, and Tsunami decides she wants to try something new and agrees. So the three of them continue their circuit of the cities hosting schools of magic, Starflight continuing his education, and Tsunami keeping an eye on Sunny while she explored and offered healing magic to those she could help. Along the way, they have a series of misadventures, but usually manage to come out on top one way or another. These three are my third favorite team, and they look really, really good. I especially like how Starflight's design turned out. My second favorite team is the Order of Copper Seedlings. They are the only Pentalon dragons I did for this, so their stories take place on an entirely different continent than everyone else. Cricket is an artificer, which isn't a super mainstream class, but it just fit her so well I couldn't help it. Artificers are inventors, mixing magic and technical knowledge to create extraordinary objects. Cricket grew up in a hive just like the rest of her tribe. She always took an extreme interest in all things mechanical and delicate. She began training to work as an artificer for the Queen, since the Queen had power over all highly skilled workers. Cricket didn't really like the prospect of working for the Queen, but it was the only way she would be allowed to pursue her goals, so she decided to do it anyways and deal with the royal interference. However, when Cricket had been working for the officials for only a few years, she was asked to design a set of manacles that would block out the prisoner's magic, and while the steep challenge excited her, she grew wary of the purpose for which they might be employed. She began work on the manacles anyways, and completed them to specification. However, they didn't work at first, and Cricket was asked to improve them. She knew she needed more information about the dragon they were meant to hold, so she convinced her superiors to bring her to the prisoner in question. The Highwing officials had managed to capture a leaf wing. Cricket hadn't been aware there were any left, and was keeping her in a lightless cell at the bottom of their hive. The leafwing was Sundew, a powerful leader of a secret resistance, a magic wielder they'd captured in a stroke of luck. However, without proper means to restrain her magic, they'd resorted to heavily drugging the leafwing, and although this kept her from escaping, it also meant they couldn't work any useful information out of her. Cricket was horrified, but hid it, returning to her workshop and thinking the situation over. Eventually, she realized she'd been lied to her entire life, and decided rashly, but bravely, to try and rescue Sundew. She made the manacles again, this time meant to appear as if they'd work without actually hurting the leafwing. Then, Cricket told her superior she'd need to apply them herself, and set out to finalize the plan. Also, Cricket's design is one of my favorites overall. I just love how her colors worked with the gold and leather to make a very warm design overall. I think it turned out super cute. Sundew, the leafwing Cricket had set out to rescue, is a druid, a spellcaster who uses the powers of nature to their advantage. Her main power is called Leaf Speak, and she uses it to bring plants to life quickly and at her command. She's working with the tattered remnants of her tribe to try and restore the forests of Pentala, using her powers to both restore the green and fend off the Highwing soldiers sent to try and finish killing off her tribe. However, in a freak accident, she found herself injured and captured by the enemy. Sometime into her captivity, she wasn't sure how long, she met a small, kind Highwing named Cricket, who slipped golden cuffs on her wrists, but whispered into her ear to ask as if she couldn't use her powers and wait for night. Shocked into obedience, at least at first, Sundew listened, and when night fell, the Highwing returned. Together, the two of them, with the aid of Sundew's magic and Cricket's knowledge of the hive, made their escape. Sundew usually wouldn't consider working with a Highwing, but since Cricket had thrown everything away to help her escape, she offered to let the young Highwing return with her. Since then, Cricket and Sundew have been working together to continue replanting trees and helping the forest come back, as well as defending their home from Hivewings. Cricket's knowledge has even helped the Leafwings speed the process in places. And finally, we have my absolute favorite pair! The Traveling Torches, which by the way was the only name the two of them could agree on, comprised of Winter and Keedley. Winter is a paladin, a holy warrior bound by strict oaths of service to the people. He's an Icewing Royal and a knight of the Kingdom of Ice. Or, he was a knight, until he was exiled from his house and left without a kingdom or queen to serve. Winter was born the third dragonet in a royal family. His sister was bound for court and his brother for the political ring, leaving him to train with the knights, eventually taking his oaths of service to the crown and people, before going on missions with the rest of the knights at his queen's bidding. He can be a bit straight-laced, but he grew up in a rigid and strict society, with parents even more demanding than usual. Icewing society is more traditional than any other kingdom, and Winter felt that keenly growing up. However, not long after he'd been knighted, he was part of a group sent south for a political mission, when their party was attacked by bandits. It was an embarrassing defeat. Many of the diplomats in the group were killed, and more, including Winter's own brother, Hailstorm, were taken prisoner. Winter was the sole survivor, and returned to his kingdom to report what had happened. Despite the fact that their group had been greatly outnumbered and the odds vastly against them, Winter, to his horror, was exiled and stripped of his rank. He was cast out of their kingdom on pain of death. At first he was too shocked to do anything. Winter's entire life was the knighthood, and his oaths of loyalty, and it had all been ripped away from him. However, eventually, he realized something. His queen might no longer want him, but his oaths were not forsaken. He'd sworn to serve his queen and protect his people, and if he could no longer do the first, he would bind himself to do the second. So Winter swore a new oath, never to rest until he found his brother, or to die trying. This new direction helped bring him out of his grief, and give him a new purpose in life. He traveled south into the Sand Kingdom to begin hunting the bandits who'd attacked him that day. Along the way, though, he meets a very annoying Sandwing. Keedley is a rogue. Rogues use stealth and manipulation to sneak around, steal things, and overcome their enemies. Fun fact, I play a rogue. He's a fun little guy who was recently falsely arrested for the murder of 43 men, but I promise he didn't do it! Anyways, Keebly is a rogue who grew up on the streets of the Scorpion Den. He works for Thorn, currently, as part of an outpost of their gang in another city. There, he met Winter, a traveling Icewing paladin who was hopelessly out of his element. Keebly took a shine to the Broken Knight and began helping him. Or at least Keebly would call it helping. The paladin seemed pretty annoyed with him for the long time. The two were about as opposite as you could get, Winter doing his best to abide by the law, Keebly constantly abusing, according to Winter, his cleverness to skirt it. Winter stilted and not good with conversation, while Keebly could talk his way out of anything. And, of course, their different childhoods lead to very different experiences as well. However, once Keebly finally manages to work the story behind his quest out of Winter, he realizes they have a similar goal. Keebly is trying to find the very same gang, because they're led by none other than his grandfather. Keebly realizes that he can help Winter accomplish his goal. Keebly's grandfather Vulture fled the Den years ago when Thorn came to power, taking his operations elsewhere. Although Thorn runs what is technically a criminal organization, they have moral standards. Keebly knows Vulture has none, and inflicts harm wherever he can, sometimes just for the fun of it. So he reveals that he can help Winter find the gang, but hides his past relation with them. He truly cares for Winter and doesn't want the Icewing to turn on him in his guilt-ridden grief. Together, the two of them continue the painstaking task of hunting Vulture down, but at least now they have a better starting point. And although he refuses to admit it, along the way Keebly does begin to grow on Winter. Despite his uncouth manner and rough upbringing, the Sandwing is fiercely loyal to those he trusts, and Winter eventually finds himself on that short list. For the first time in his life, Winter has a friend, a companion who protects him, cares about him, even though he doesn't have to. Also, yeah, somewhere along the way, they're gonna run into the Star Stringers, and Keebly totally starts working overtime to try and woo the aloof mystic who'd recently shortened her name to Moon. Because I am a sucker for Moonblee in any universe. Oh my goodness, that ended up being so long! But yeah, I had an awesome time with this project, and I just adore the designs and the stories that came out of it. I may need to do some more stories in this universe sometime. I'm just super in love with the world and the setup of this alternate universe. Anyways, y'all be sure to let me know in the comments who was your favorite. For me, obviously, it's Winter and Keebly. I love their story, their bromance, and interaction in general, and I'm so happy with how the design turned out. But everyone was pretty fun to work on, though I admit by the time I finished all the drawings, I was pretty ready to be done. It was great practice with the design though, especially with fitting human accessories to dragons, which is definitely outside my comfort zone, so something good to practice. Check out the description for links to my DeviantArt and Redbubble as well, if y'all are interested in seeing more of my art or supporting me. And as always, be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video as much as I did. Thank you so much for watching, and please have an awesome week.